Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to the 2014 University of Melbourne Virtual Fair for International Students. My name is Rhett Miller and I will be your host for this, the first in a series of live webcasts as part of this year's fair. These webcasts will cover a variety of topics to help you better understand why the university is such a special place for so many people and why it may also be a special place for you in the future. Because we're always interested in hearing from you, after each panel discussion in these webcasts, you, the viewer, will have the opportunity to put to us your questions live on air. If you don't get a chance to ask a question in these webcasts, for the next 16 hours, our university staff will be on hand in one of our 3 booths to answer your queries via online chat. So please everyone, get online and ask them your question. But now, it's time to welcome our first guest to help introduce the university and the wonderful city of Melbourne. Joining me here tonight, we have got Keith Loy, who is currently undertaking the Bachelor of Biomedicine at the university. He's one of our fine international students from Malaysia. And joining him, we have Dr. Heather Gaunt, who is the Curator of Academic Programs at the Ian Potter Museum of Art. Her particular research interests are in medical humanities in the visual arts field. Please welcome Keith Loy, Heather Gaunt. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Okay, so if we can start with you, Keith. There's students watching from all over the world right now. They're, weighing up what particular institution would be right for them. They might be looking at institutions in the UK, in the US, some in Hong Kong, but there may be some looking at Australia. And my question for you is, why did you choose the University of Melbourne?
Well, that's actually a really, really good question. I was fortunate enough to actually visit the University of Melbourne on open day before I started here. And just walking on campus, it really gave me a very good feel. The environment is magnificent. It's located right near the CBD in the city of Melbourne. And I think that's just so convenient. Like if you need to do something or if you ever need plans after university, after classes, the city is just a short tram ride away. Of course, the rank of Melbourne in Australia definitely helps as well. Very good choices.
Indeed. And Heather, you've taught at the university for some time. You've also been a student here. So I guess what makes Melbourne a special place for you?
Melbourne has been very special to me all my life, and growing up in country Victoria, so 3 hours away from the city, somehow I'd always thought that Melbourne was the place I was going to go, even though my brothers and sisters went to other universities in Melbourne. So I arrived as an undergrad in the 80s and did an arts degree and a music degree and thoroughly enjoyed myself and ended up moving on to postgrad, and then was fortunate enough to gain work first at the intern level here in the library, and after a few scholarships and other things, came back to work at the Art Museum. And so in fact I've had 80% of my working life at the university and I love the place.
Well, you're definitely a strong authority on the place then with that level of experience. So Heather, you teach a very special program at the university as well, and I think that this is something that a lot of our international students would be very interested in hearing about. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about that program that you're involved in?
I'd be delighted to, because I'm very passionate about it. And in fact, in my earlier work at the University Art Museum, I worked in the curatorial areas and always felt that we were lacking a little in our engagement with the student body, and that has been dramatically changed in the last few years with the establishment of an academic programs unit within our art museum. And so now we regularly have classes and students coming through the museum all the time throughout the semesters. Last year we had over 5,000 students coming through in scheduled classes and in research activity. And what's very special about it to me is the multidisciplinary aspect of it. So I get to engage with academics and students from all the different disciplines of the university, which is incredibly exciting. So I work with medical students, dental students, students from architecture. We have art history, classics and archaeology, science, maths and stats, commerce, whatever it is, we seek to find a useful and exciting engagement to inset within their existing subject areas. And while it was challenging at the beginning of setting up this program a couple of years ago to make academics understand the utility of those engagements at the Art Museum, in fact that's become easier and easier because of the university's mandate and passion for cross-disciplinary teaching and its awareness of the great value of that type of activity. In fact, now all I have to do is send a few emails and the academics will say, oh yes, we know about it from so-and-so and we'll come and engage, and then I get to work out with them what the particular connection will be. So, and that can be very diverse. So for example, it'll be very specific connections with content, for example, with our exhibitions or collections in, say, art history or curatorial studies or classics or conservation areas. Or it can be a little bit more tangential, where we're using the environment or the context of the university, of the art museum. So I'm thinking there of something like, I had maths statistics students in a couple of weeks ago, where we used the environment to get them to think about the use of statistical data, and they applied that to the exhibition that was on the wall. So that after a lecture in the museum, the task was to go and use these skills to value an artwork with an assignment outcome. So the students see real interesting interdisciplinary ways in which this idea is being used, but they also, it contributes directly to their course outcomes and their assessment. And so that is across, you know, creative writing as well, so it's an inspiration for students, or with dance and contemporary music composition. We have students using the space as a physical acoustic space in which to develop ideas and perform. So it's very exciting. But my favourite work, I think, is within what I call the areas of states of attention and attitudes of mind. And this is where we're building more core skills in the students. And the art museum is a unique environment in which this can occur. So we can teach them those really critical skills of close observation and gathering visual data and logically working with that material to come to an interpretation or an inference or a hypothesis. Depending on what subject area I'm working with, we can teach them the language that I would use in the art context and show them how it parallels their own disciplinary language. And metacognitively, you're getting them to understand how those their own thinking is applied in a different context. So in the art museum, they are having to think in new ways. And this is particularly interesting working with medical and dental students, who I have been doing a lot of work with over the last couple of years, and I find probably the most exciting part of my work, where we cover the whole spectrum of visual observation skills, clear communication of data, being tolerant of ambiguous information, being able to hold off from coming to conclusions too rapidly. These are skills which the Art Museum is really valuable for, but which often students in these science areas find very challenging. You know, they want to come, you know, I am talking to a science student.
Yes.
They want to be able to seek a single final answer. And in the art context, I'm constantly saying there is no single final answer. There are multiple answers, but if you have to demonstrate that you have the data to justify what your interpretation or inference is. And sometimes they get very angry. I had PhD students in science in a subject called Communicating Science for Research, again, a little earlier this semester. And some of them very clearly and articulately expressed this discomfort of working in this odd environment and having to do something that they found very challenging and without a specific outcome. But in fact, at the end of the activity, they had changed their attitude and they had definitely enjoyed it. And I also feel that they had understood the relevance to their own learning in their own discipline. And in the medical students, that has specific clinical relevance too, and for the dental students, in that we want them to practice that observation of a whole environment and those thinking skills. And then with our dental students in particular, we're working with special needs dentists in their second year, and we're practicing skills of empathy and mindfulness and professional reflection. And it's, again, a terrific environment for them to step out of their intense clinical environments and spend time thinking about the wider context of who their patients might be.
And it wouldn't be something that would be readily apparent to students that this medium of art can sort of, you know, harness those particular diagnostic skills that you're talking about. So this is a way that we, I guess, working with all our students, both domestic and international, use more, I guess, unique ways to harness critical thinking skills, which I think is something that a lot of international students are really looking for in their program.
I'm definitely going to have to agree there. Like what you said earlier, how having a set answer, it's something that's sort of built up in your mind over some time, and it's really difficult to find alternatives to it. But with your program, it's actually really good to get you thinking about all the other possibilities.
It's great to hear you say that.
Yeah.
We've worked with biomedical students at the honours level at the beginning of this year, and we specifically focused on that visual data gathering, and there was also lots of conversation about the contexts in which data might be manipulated in your area, which of course is a concern for biomedical research, and how honing those skills of really close looking and being alert to something that shouldn't be there is very valuable.
Indeed. Well, that then brings me back to you, Keith. So we've heard about, I guess, one of our unique programs that we run here at the university. I guess a lot of students watching would be really interested in hearing about, I guess, what the typical day is of a student at the university. So maybe do you want to sort of outline to our viewers what a typical day is like for you as one of our hardworking biomedical students?
Yes, as a biomedical student, there's a lot of study involved. But that's likely with all the degrees. Anything you study, you'd have to put a lot of work into it. But I just think more so for biomedicine, and because I'm living quite far away from the university, I commute every day, and a lot of people start to think that commuting is a bit of a chore. It's too troublesome. But it's actually a really good time to sort of just get your readings done, or just brush up on your notes and things like that. So my typical day starts off with just catching the train, utilizing Melbourne's public transport, which it's brilliant, great way to get around. And then just going to lectures.
I'll just stop you right there. For those viewers watching in Singapore and Hong Kong, it's not that great. Okay, it's okay, but it's not that great.
Getting there.
Yeah,
It'll get there eventually.
It's getting there. That's right. But it is easy to get around, as you mentioned, with tram and train. But yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So generally my day starts off with attending lectures, and I think the lectures here run really well. Most of the lecturers, they'll be out there. They'll be really passionately talking about their field of research. And one of the most interesting things I found at Melbourne is that because there's so much research going on at Melbourne, my typical day covers a lot of things that we previously didn't know. For example, just 2 or 3 days ago, we're having a lecture on neurodegeneration and diseases of the brain. And one of our lecturers was presenting data on stuff that he's done that might completely change the way the world views neurodegeneration. And I thought that, wow, as a third-year student, listening to something like that is just fantastic. So they would typically go to lectures, get all this really cool information, possibly do some tutorials where we have some discussions with other students and sort of build on our knowledge.
So what's the difference between a lecture and a tutorial?
Here a lecture is basically having someone at the front, and they're presenting you with all this information and explaining to you what the topic's about. Whereas in tutorials, you tend to sort of get together in groups with students, and there's a facilitator or a tutor that sort of facilitates discussion, and you sort of build on your understanding of what was presented in the lecture. So a tutorial sort of, I guess, supplements a lecture. And and obviously doing a science subject, I have my practical subjects as well. So working in a lab, which I think with Melbourne, fantastic facilities with labs. I'm majoring in microbiology and immunology, and we've actually just opened up the Peter Doherty Institute, which is a fantastic brand new building. So us, third-year microbiology students, and further on, get to use all these new facilities. So again, fantastic, very exciting. I just finished a 3-hour practical today, actually. So my day tends to start pretty early, 9, and it could finish anytime at 1, or on Thursdays finish at 5. So sometimes it's a bit long, but it's full of fun. Yeah, no,
it sounds very, very action-packed. It's definitely a long day. I guess, you're talking very positively, I guess, about your experiences here, which is really important. But it is challenging also being an international student. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about the challenges you faced being an international student at Melbourne.
Yep, I guess one of the challenges is definitely just the way you learn at university. And just coming to Melbourne, like maybe this might not just affect Melbourne itself, but in general, just the learning style at university is quite challenging. So I know I struggled a bit at the first few weeks just adapting to the new learning style, but then there is a lot of support for that, obviously. And I guess another thing is just making friends, meeting new people, which coming to a university that has well over 40,000 students. The chance to meet people is there, but then as an international student as well, you're moving to a completely new environment. It is a bit confronting and it can get quite difficult. So I guess the first few weeks I was sort of, how am I gonna start talking to people? But then I realized that, at Melbourne, it's just so easy to meet people. You just sit in a lecture, next to someone and say hi, and it sort of builds from there. So I think that was a really good experience for me, just starting university here and then just sort of building my connections from there.
So your advice would be to make sure that you talk to the person next to you in your first few lectures.
Easily.
You'll only get out of Melbourne what you give to it.
Yes, definitely.
So have you also got involved in any clubs and societies or anything around the campus?
Yep. So there are well over 100 clubs and societies run on campus. Stuff like Chocolate Lovers Club or weekly watches of anime. It covers a wide range, and obviously there are like student-run associations. So faculty-based ones like the Science Student Society, Biomed Student Society, Commerce Student Society. And also stuff like the Malaysians of Melbourne Uni or the Taiwanese student group, things like that, just where groups of students come together, and instead of just focusing just on your studies, you actually have that avenue to sort of meet more people and just do different activities. So when I started at Melbourne, I actually joined the Leo Club, which is the Lions Club, so sort of like a charity volunteer sort of club. And then from there on, I learned of a lot of different volunteer opportunities. I've actually, not solely at University of Melbourne, but I've actually helped with City of Melbourne running the Lord Mayor Student Welcome.
Yep.
And also I volunteer during summer for VCE Summer School. That's also run by the university.
Tell us a little bit about that Lord Mayor's Welcome. I think people will be interested to hear about that.
So I think that's a very, it's a program run by the City of Melbourne that sort of welcomes, it's purely to welcome international students. And obviously not just international students, everyone's welcome to it. It's run twice a year. And I think the first one's usually around March, and then there's another one in August for people who come in mid-year. And it's really just a day of, there are a lot of information booths there for international students, a lot of support if required. Usually they run a modeling show, so a fashion show where they get models to come in, there's lots of pictures. There's a petting zoo, there's a reptile zoo. So just it's just really welcoming to come to Melbourne and see, all this being thrown for students.
I guess a reflection that the city is a very multicultural place,
definitely.
And somewhere which really, really appreciates international students and recognises them as such an important part of Melbourne. I guess that's a nice segue for us to talk about this wonderful city that we're in. So some of our viewers might know Melbourne is the world's most livable city, according to The Economist, and has been for the last 3 years or so. I'd be interested to get both of your perspectives on the city and what are your favourite things to do in Melbourne, because everyone has their own personal Melbourne, and because there are so many things to do. So if we can start with you, Heather, tell us about your Melbourne.
Well, my Melbourne revolves around exercise and food, I think, and culture, I should say, given where I work. I'm a very keen distance runner, so I love Melbourne partly because of the fantastic environment. We live so close to huge parks, and the Yarra River runs through, and there's trails on the Yarra, so fabulous. And even more widely, the number of sporting venues and sporting clubs is brilliant. So for people who are interested in sport, Melbourne is a wonderful place to be, and the weather's kind to us in terms of that, whether you're a triathlete as well, like you go down to the sea and do your triathlons or just run in the countryside. But and then of course the good side of that is you get to eat lots of food to replenish, and that's the best thing. The cafe life is fantastic. So, and that's really exploded in the last decade or two. I think you'd have to agree. When I was an undergrad student here, there were not very many cafes, not many coffee shops, that's for sure. And now it's just the life is out there on the street, which is
Yeah.
absolutely vibrant and a fantastic part of Melbourne. So I have to say they're my key things.
How about you, Keith?
I definitely have to agree with the food and sort of the cafe atmosphere. When I first sort of visited the city of Melbourne and just having a walk around, I noticed all these little cafes, all around the place, little laneways. I didn't think much of it then, but then I actually started coming to university and then sort of just going into the city with friends. We'd be thinking, oh, what should we do today? And you could just walk down the street or walk down a lane and you see this nice little cafe. A couple of days ago, I just visited this quaint little cafe, sort of like in one of the laneways of Melbourne. And just sitting in there, enjoying a cup of coffee with your good friends and just having a chat. It's really nice. I had this discussion with another friend and we mentioned that, oh, what do you think of Melbourne? Because he's visiting from Canada. And I was just like, oh, what do you think of Melbourne? And he said, oh, Melbourne's great. It's really laid back. It's a very youthful city. Like people are in suits and people go about, but people are still taking that time out to enjoy the city rather than just sort of like, oh, I got to go to work and I got to do all these things. But yeah, just the whole environment, the whole laid back attitude. It's just a very good place to be. It's very positive.
I think you're right about the youthful side, and I think that's partly because of the situation of Melbourne University and then a couple of other major universities right near the centre. So youth are everywhere apparent and as you say, richly living.
So many universities in the city, so many international students as well. I mean, the city becomes noticeably quieter when international students are away on break.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's something which makes the CBD so vibrant when they're here. So getting back to something which is also an integral part of the city, and that is of course the university that we're here to talk about. Something that's very, very, very important to Melbourne is its innovation and research. We are the largest, or approaching becoming the largest research body in the country, even overtaking the federal government in terms of research budget. We have some of the world's best academics, as you'd mentioned, Keith, in our fine institution. And some of the examples, I guess, of some of that innovation can be seen in the bionic ear, which has allowed tens of thousands of profoundly deaf people to hear over the course of the last 30 years, and now we're working on the bionic eye. But there's also innovation going on in some of our programs. And Heather, I know that you have been looking at some innovative online delivery of programs, which I thought you might want to share with some of our viewers briefly.
I'd love to. It's actually a key part of the expansion of our programs and our reach to students. So while the value of visiting the museum on site is terrific and it introduces certain ways of thinking and a different experience, to really reach out to our very dispersed student body, potentially we need to be in an online environment as well. So just this, at the moment, I'm in the middle of developing a module for a course which is called Thinking Scientifically, which will be on in second semester, which is coming out of the science faculty, but am fortunate to be involved in it through the art context. And those skills that we were talking about earlier around observation and paralleling the skills of inferencing and data gathering in art contexts are the same as in science contexts. So we're using the idea of observation as a skill and teaching it with the materials that are available within the museum. So I'll be doing some online podcast type activities and delivered into YouTube type delivery little lectures around where myself and a scientist will be comparing and sharing our ways of thinking and talking and interpreting visual imagery, which is really exciting. And there's a number of ways in which we're packaging that material and getting students to participate. And that's just one part of the course, but I haven't heard of anybody else doing this sort of work yet. So it's exciting for me to try and work out the parameters of that and how far we do it. And the potential for that, of course, is to deliver it on a larger MOOCs type scale because it's of that context of thinking scientifically as a subject area is very applicable across many fields. And this will be offered, I believe, as a breadth as well as within the science faculty, so it will be utilised by a lot of different students. So that's one way in which I see us reaching out. The other one, which I think is of interest, is that part of my role is around encouraging research with the Ian Potter Museum at the centre in some way, and in many ways this gives me a really unique position to go out around some of these fantastic academic research activities that are happening in the university and say, how can I bring this in and to act as a central hub for that activity here at the museum? And it's a really unique opportunity to do that, because say someone in science is going to find it harder to bring in curatorial students and art history students and graduate school of education teaching students on a project because of their disciplinary specific context. Whereas at the Art Museum I can say, okay, I will manage this project for you, can you feed me appropriate students? So I really enjoy being able to put these sorts of teams together, and I think it's an important role for the museum. So one of the ones that I've really enjoyed working on over last year was the development of an application for people's personal phones, which used the specific master's research expertise of a Masters of Computer Science student in the faculty who was looking at indoor tracking with existing Wi-Fi. So this was very innovative research, and we thought to apply that to an application for use in the museum, and then to get graduate students from the humanities areas to feed in their expertise in terms of the design and the end user interface aspects, and then just the written content. So we had expertise coming in. These students thoroughly enjoyed working together with the Potter at the centre over a whole semester, and we produced this fantastic app which we are using in the museum, and which we're able to showcase in the museum's next conference, which is the biggest conference in this museums and technology field, a little later this year. So it's that type of program that I just thoroughly enjoy working with, because they're fabulous students with really innovative research, and the academics who they work with are keen to feed into something like this.
And it then has an end stage real world application.
Which and in fact a number of the students from that project have got fabulous jobs. One of them's now in Google in America.
Fantastic. Well, there's no better place to work than Google. Wouldn't we all like to be there? I think we're just starting to run short of time, so we should now actually turn to our viewers and start to hear from them some of the questions that they have for us. So let's start here and we'll have a look. We've got a question here from Junad. Junad says, hello, I'm Junad, and I want to ask about your academic requirements for chemical engineering. Now, I appreciate that you folk here will not necessarily be able to answer that one. So we offer a master's in engineering where you can major in a chemical stream, and what you would require for that is an average of at least 65% in your undergraduate program, and you would also have to have completed some science and mathematics subjects as prerequisites in order to gain admission to that particular program, or be considered for admission for that particular program. So what I would recommend you do, Junaid, is go on to one of our booths. If you go to our graduate booth, you can chat with staff there about the requirements specifically for that Masters of Engineering. But thank you very much for that question. We'll just go to another one down here. So this is from a student in Singapore, it looks like. Hi, I'm Janet, a student from Temasak Polytechnic, pursuing a diploma in financial business informatics. May I know if there's any free credit if I register for a Bachelor in Commerce in these following majors: accounting, business, management, and marketing? This is a very, very good question, Janet. The university does, on a case-by-case basis, offer credit to students from various polytechnics in Singapore. And what happens is we will assess your syllabus if it hasn't already been assessed by the university to determine what credit if any, you will obtain. I can't tell you for certain what credit you would actually get. However, what I can say is that you can indeed submit your syllabus. Generally, the university has a policy of not offering credit over 50% of the total duration of your course. In some programs we do, but mostly it's 50% is the cap. So that's something for you to keep in mind. Now, I'll just see if we've got a more generic question that maybe you two folk here can answer. Okay. Let's see what we've got here. Oh, this is an excellent one for you, Keith.
Hey.
This is from T. Nguyen, who is in Norway. So, hi, I'm T from Norway. I wonder what the social environment is like at the University of Melbourne. It's a nice one to finish on.
Very nice. The social environment, how can I describe it? There's so much going on. We have free bands playing at the university every week. There are free barbecues going around all the time. So, you could meet up with friends and line up for a barbecue and just have a chat. We get a lot of, we have what we call South Lawn, which is just this massive open area right in this sort of in the middle of the university. And, everyone just goes there, have a sit down and sort of just the whole very laid back atmosphere, have a sit down, have a chat. I think the social environment's great. Again, with all the clubs and societies that we have at the university, there's always something going on, and there's always more ways to meet more people, which again feeds back to that whole, go meet someone from a lecture. So, if you're really uncomfortable doing that, there are all these other avenues that you can do it. Even for an international student, if you're finding it very difficult, there are a lot of international student-focused groups that sort of help assist you in that transition. Right. And again, just even not just internationals, but even the local students, they are very happy to sort of get to know you and learn about your culture. So I found it again a bit confronting at the start, but once I actually got out there and started talking to people, it was just a great atmosphere to meet people.
And I should mention there is an international student support unit at the university that can provide you with assistance in a range of areas if you are an international student and need support beyond that sort of social network that you have. Yeah, sure.
And can I also say, from the academic point of view, there's a lot of focus on providing the right environment for international students to feel comfortable and to achieve their full potential within the structure of the actual teaching environment. So from my perspective, I've seen some really interesting innovations that really, from the very first tutorials and lectures, encourage the students to engage with each other in the ways that you're talking about, so that then they can take that activity out onto the South Lawn and continue beyond the classroom. But it's certainly not something that just occurs outside the teaching and learning environment. It's integral to our teaching practice here now.
Yeah, we encourage everyone to make friends when they're here. That's a very, very lovely note to finish on, folks. Thank you very much, Heather. Thank you, Keith. You've been wonderful guests. And please stay tuned, folks, for the next webcast which we're having, which looks at what it's like to be a research student at the university. So please stay tuned for that webcast coming up in 15 minutes. See you all soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.